welcome to a special weekend edition of Crypto Convos. I'm your host, MK Lords, and joining me today from an undisclosed location is Julia Tourianski, also known as Brave the World. She makes some really awesome YouTube videos, and I first found out about her through her Bitcoin Basic Bitch video, which if you haven't seen, check it out because it is the funniest thing ever, and it's great for people who are new to Bitcoin too. So she recently did another video that featured all the most awesome, insightful people in Bitcoin called the Declaration of Bitcoin's Independence, which stems from one of her articles in Bitcoin Magazine, which was really, really awesome too. But the video is cool. It's a bunch of people that you've seen on Crypto Combos and that are very active in the Bitcoin space. So definitely check that out. So how are you doing today, Julia?
I'm really good. Hi.
Hi. So, so awesome. And I met Julia recently in person at PorkFest. So we got to hang out and that was really cool. That was when she did a lot of the filming for the Declaration of Bitcoin's Independence. So how did you come up with that idea?
Finding hula hooping.
Yes, I was hula hooping quite a
I
bit.
just yeah, I discovered your hidden talent. That was fun. Um,
Yes.
yeah, so yeah, I did a lot of filming. That actually Porkfest, a lot of the shots came together really nicely there, and I got Patrick Byrne at the festival, and that was a cool experience. And he loved the video, by the way. He emailed me and said he loved it, so I'm happy. That's good. Patrick Byrne approved.
Very cool. Very cool. So that's awesome. So what has been, I like to get to know people's background in philosophy and kind of where they've come from. So where did you start kind of philosophically and how did you get to where you are now? What are your kind of personal philosophic beliefs?
Well, in high school, I started to really lean towards libertarianism. And then by the process of elimination, I became an anarchist quite recently, actually. And then I discovered the potentials of Bitcoin and blockchain technology and met some very interesting people that really sparked this revelation in my mind about the entire movement, I guess. And you can't go back now. And I describe the Bitcoin. There's like two kinds of people in the Bitcoin community. There's the people outside the forest and inside the forest. So the people outside the forest are looking at this taiga, at this spanning wide, endless wilderness, and they can't comprehend it because they can't see its end or its beginning. And they're a bit scared to venture in because they're not sure what to expect. But they're curious. And then there's the people who have ventured in the forest and they're too close and they're in the wilderness and they can't get out and they're almost lost and they're not sure which direction to go or which direction the forest goes and leads to, and they can't get out. So that happened to me really fast. I went from outside the forest into the forest within like a week, and I just cannot get out. And I think you're probably in the same boat as me.
Yeah, I
I
think
think,
so.
yeah. And everybody in the video who I chose to participate is definitely deep in the forest, and they're doing everything that they can to navigate and to see where it leads and not to get lost. But I think where the technology is right now, everyone's a little lost. But hopefully, the declaration will give a little bit of guidance to the people outside the forest, just to give a little philosophical and political basis for the technology. And people like to keep it neutral, but it's very difficult too because I think the blockchain is inherently disruptive and it undermines a lot of the current systems that people have been forced to subscribe to for centuries. So I don't see how it can be neutral. Absolutely.
Yeah, it comes from cypherpunk philosophy basically. So this is where it came from. It's very hard, I think, to ignore the origins of Bitcoin and try to neutralize it politically. It doesn't really make sense if you look at its origins. And yes, it's very adaptive. It can be used for a lot of different things, but at its core, it's very disruptive. And there are a lot of people who try to kind of downplay the disruptive elements of it to make it a little, I don't know if they're trying to make it PC friendly or friendly to the politicians or whatever they're trying to do to kind of soften its image. But I think you end up neutering it when you do it something like that. So
Yeah, you miss its point. And I think people like Circle and Coinbase who want to keep people's private keys, they're, I know they're providing a service that's easy for people, but the whole point of this tech is to be your own personal bank and hold your own personal monetary sovereignty on your computer or in cold storage or however you choose to do it, hopefully in cold storage. So it's, it defies the point, and they're trying to make it inclusive and easy for people, but to me it misses the entire point of the advantage of this tech, because it's about personally empowering people in a direct monetary way. And when you hold people's private keys, that's just like a bank. You're holding their Bitcoin. I don't understand. You're missing the point.
yeah, and people are very used to that. They're used to the bank holding on to their money and, delegating that responsibility to someone else. So I think in the interim, services like Coinbase and Circle, they might be useful for people with that mindset, but people have learned their lessons with others holding their private keys a few times before in very serious ways. And what it eventually comes down to is you can't trust these third parties. That's the whole point of Bitcoin, is that it's a trustless system.
People are very slow to learn too, and I hate, they're like, oh, this is just like a bank. We're like a bank, and we do this, and we do that. That's the kind of message they're sending. People, oh, great. No, we're trying to get away from that. So I don't know. People can choose to do whatever they want, but I'm hoping that with time, the dialogue is gonna come back to the point of the technology, right?
Yeah, and I really hope it doesn't take another economic collapse that's caused by the banks to do that, because it seems like people kind of have short-term memory loss with what just happened in 2008. I mean, this literally just happened not too long ago, right before Bitcoin came on the scene, and it's like people completely disregard that now and they're flocking to the banks again for help. And really, we need to become independent of the banks. We need to completely, disassociate from them. Their practices aren't ethical, and they prohibit a lot of people from getting access to capital that they may need too. I mean, there are a lot of restrictions on banking now. It's really become this old system. When I look at it, it reminds me of like a dinosaur system. It's like, and Bitcoin is just a future like flying cars and stuff. So.
It's it's like there's all this forgiveness with our old systems. Like, like your grandpa is a dick, but you forgive him because he's old. Like, or like your grandma's super racist, but it's like, oh, you're old, it's okay. And it's the same with the banking system. Oh, Cyprus. Oh well, it's the banking system. It's okay. We'll forgive you. But with something new, it's like, oh, Mt. Gox, unforgivable. Bitcoin is dead. Like, I mean, I guess that's just human nature.
Yeah, the standards
If
applied
there's,
are very
if
differently.
there's
What's that?
it's frustrating. It
It is
frustrates me.
frustrating. You're right, because the standards are applied differently. They're forgiving these banks who have screwed us over time and time again, and it's like people act like it's not going to happen again, but literally that's what these people do. Like, they don't have your interests in mind. They have everything. They only have their own interests in mind, and every motivation to stop you from pursuing yours. Whereas Bitcoin really doesn't have those kinds of goals, and yeah, you're seeing it judged way more harshly. You saw something like Mount Gox, which was horrible. I mean, not to downplay how horrible Mount Gox was. Tons of people, good friends of mine, lost a lot of money on Mount Gox, but the feature of that collapsing was, a corrupt exchange was allowed to collapse and was not allowed to be bailed out. And a lot of people miss that because the banks got bailed out and they're still trying to screw us over, whereas Mt. Gox didn't, and that's a good thing.
The free market's supposed to teach lessons, and people aren't used to having a free market, so they're scared. But
Mhm.
I'm excited. I mean, I'm excited for the anonymity aspect of Bitcoin potentially in the future, because that's the problem here. Like we have this clandestine state that gets to do things in secret and undermine us, and we find out later, and everyone forgives them, or well, maybe they don't forgive them, but we can't really do much, can we? So maybe it's our turn to be surreptitious and get away with things that
Yeah,
they think we shouldn't, because
absolutely.
I'm waiting for this flip, I'm waiting for the reverse to happen. I think it'll be a lot of fun.
So, what kind of anonymizing services are you most excited about? Are you excited about things like Dark Wallet or Color Coins? Like, what are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to Zero Cash
All right.
because yeah, I'm looking forward to it. We'll see. We'll see if they deliver. Peter Todd seems to be pretty into it. So, I mean, he's a smart guy. But we'll see. Dark Wallet is having some funding issues. I mean, they started raising more money again since yesterday. I think Amir is tweeting out loads, and we'll see what happens with Dark Wallet. I mean, it's promising. It's not perfect. It's not, it could still be traced. It's not perfectly anonymous, but to me, Dark Wallet is just like the 3D printed gun concept. It's more about the idea and the threat that's important. It's not whether, with the 3D printed guns, it's not whether people are actually downloading them and using the guns, because it's actually not very practical. The plastic, they break. It's easier to buy a real gun on the black market. So, but the idea that anybody could, that's that's the powerful message there. And Dark Wallet seems to be from the same school of thought to me. It's the marketing and the image and the threat to the state and the opportunity for us to be anonymous and the first step towards anonymity. It's the idea. So whether it works really well or not in the end, I actually don't care. But if if it permeates, if the if it creates a consensus towards anonymity in the community with the way that it's been presented, that's what's important to me. And then other innovations like zero cash, or maybe something even better than zero cash, who knows? Like, there's so much innovation every month that things can come out of the left field and we won't even be expecting it, but I know that they will. I'm not worried.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see the competition among different people who are trying to make this technology really viable and go dark with our finances, because it is our right to have private transactions. It only makes sense. And you raise a good point about Cody kind of forcing their hand. I got to speak with him. It was in February, actually, kind of about the same thing. I got to sit down with him and talk with him a bit about it. And yeah, that's really what it comes down to is you have to force their hand with these things. These regulations have kind of come out and they're trying to crush the technology. But the thing is, all of these other projects are being developed too. And I'm kind of wondering which one will outpace, which. And I think that I strongly believe in the people kind of on our side of things who were already putting the work in. And we're not competing with perfect. I think it's important to note, even Bitcoin has its flaws, but it's not competing with perfect. It's competing with a very flawed, broken legacy banking system. So I think it's
Yeah,
really, really important.
it's not,
Oh, sorry, it
it's
cut
not
out a little.
incomplete, efficient.
No, no. Well, I guess it's
Yeah,
efficient
it's
for some
great
people, but not
until
everyone.
their identity gets stolen or their bank account gets cleared, until then.
Right. Did you see that
Yeah.
article? It just came out yesterday, I believe. Something like half of American adults have been hacked. They've had their information hacked in the past year.
Wow.
Yeah.
I believe it. I mean, and the sad thing about identity theft is people's lives are ruined and nobody can do anything. Like you're you're done. It I don't know why, but somehow the system doesn't let you recover from it. It's very difficult. Like every story I've ever heard, like, yeah, I've had to start all over.
Yeah, it
It's
is
just
very hard.
insane.
Yeah, and I think
So,
that's
but
more. Oh, go ahead.
it's kind of sad because people, that's the problem here. The regular average person would rather be a victim or would rather be guilty of something than to feel responsible. So when we this has got to be like an evolution in a person in like personal growth, because if people start to become comfortable with being responsible, then they'll be comfortable with holding their own private keys and wielding that power. Now, right now, people just want to displace responsibility to the state or to banks, and this concept um, can touch a lot on a lot of different points, whether it's monetary or lawful. Like people would rather go to the police than interact with each other on a direct peer-to-peer way, and I think that's the revolution here. That's the real revolution. People need to really accept responsibility and govern themselves. And Bitcoin's not going to be adopted in the way that it's, in my mind, supposed to be until that kind of personal growth happens. But I don't know. I think it is happening, especially to people who have been victimized and they realize that maybe they don't prefer to be a victim or guilty.
And I kind of go back and forth with the widespread adoption thing because how Bitcoin is right now, I don't think a lot of people are ready for it because, like you said, they haven't made that shift towards self-responsibility. They're still content with letting banks handle their money and trusting that the government will make them right if their identity gets stolen. And like you mentioned, that's not always the case. And I don't know that it's necessarily so much malice on the case of government as it is incompetence. I think, there's just too much bureaucracy and the people a lot of government workers I know, I mean, they don't really care about their jobs. There's not much that inspires them to go to work, even, so that you have a lot of other problems kind of bogging the whole system down. So you don't get made right when your identity gets stolen all the time. And, maybe you'll be lucky and you will, but there's a lot of problems with that. And it does start internally, and until people reach that point, I don't think people are really going to be ready for mass adoption, and they're not going to want to take the precautions they need to take to secure their funds because they're used to other people doing it. And I think that's probably the biggest problem for me is security. You have to encourage people to really pay attention and really take the steps that are necessary, and they're not super easy.
Yeah, and they are, it's becoming more saturated with like with Tor and Made Safe is Made Safe is really exciting, and all of these things are coming together at the same time. And I think once it becomes more normalized, and once you go to your friend's house and they're like, oh, you don't use Tor, then it'll be this chain effect, right? And I mean, the generation like of my sister who was like 19 and younger, these kids, like, look at Vine, all these 13 to 15-year-olds vining away. They're very present, they're very in the moment, they're very tech. So to learn something, to use something like Tor, or to learn how a private key works, it's not hard for these kids. Like they grow up on the internet. So I think the knowledge will be out there, and I really do believe that the enthusiasm will follow pretty quick.
Absolutely. And it's very encouraging seeing these younger generations so interested and curious about this technology. And I really like to focus my outreach on them because they just seem a lot more open. But do you kind of change how you describe Bitcoin depending on who you're talking to generational wise? I mean, whether it's an older person or a younger person?
Yeah, of course. I was actually very surprised recently. I went over to my neighbor's house to pick up a package, and they're quite old. Like the man is in his late 80s, and then his daughter is in her, 50s, 60s. And they were like, "Oh, I heard you on the CBC talking about Bitcoin." And then we looked up your channel, and oh, we're very intrigued. We'd love to talk to you about. And then before they said that part, I was like, "Oh no. Oh no." They looked up my channel. They're gonna not talk to me ever again. But they were so open and interested. So I think I'm gonna go and try to explain it to them and introduce them to the to the innovation. And then a week after that, I help out this woman in her shop, and she's in her late 50s, and she hardly even uses the computer. She has trouble with Facebook, okay? But she's like, "Oh, I saw some of your videos." I'm like, "No, I'm gonna be fired." And then
Aw.
she's like, "Oh, can you tell me about this?" So I told her about Bitcoin, I told her about anarchy, I told her about libertarianism, and you know what? I really try to apply it to the way things are happening today. Like, this is in Canada. So I'm like, okay, well, this happened. And how did you feel about that? And don't you think that if we did it a different way, it could be more efficient? She's like, yes, that was horrible that happened. And blah, blah. And she has her own stories. Everyone's been, messed up and fucked with by the bureaucratic system. So everyone's annoyed and fed up. And after talking to her and bringing her, she even asked about, of course, she asked about the roads, and I was just very calm explaining it to her and saying, well, the construction right now on Dundas and on Bloor, and what if it was like this instead? What if we introduced competition and it wouldn't be construction for the whole entire summer, and then you get to work on, explaining it in these very basic, applicable ways to real life for the older people really works. And at the end of the conversation, she was like, "Oh, can you explain to me exactly how Bitcoin works? And maybe I'm an anarchist and I didn't really know it." And how dope is that? It didn't take that much effort. If you're a logical person and you live in the real world, you're bound to have frustrations with the current system, and you're bound to be open minded to other things.
And I think a lot of people have anarchic leanings and don't really realize it. When people hear the word anarchy, it's a very scary kind of thing. They're taught that it's a very scary, chaotic state of being, but they don't understand that there's actually a pretty rich philosophical school behind it. And there's so many different variances of anarchy, too. It's very cool to just kind of study the different types there are. And a lot of people are pretty independent, whether they realize it or not. So you've done a little bit of traveling between Canada and the U.S. In what ways do you see? In what ways are things a little bit different as far as talking to people about Bitcoin, or is it harder to talk to people in Canada about the system there, or in the U.S.? What different main differences do you see?
Just generally, Canadians are more socialist and liberal and more statist. They're still a little bit brainwashed with, they have this comparison to the horrible downfall of America, and they think Canada's great in comparison. And then when you start to kind of break things down and illustrate that, we're not that great either. Some people have a very emotional reaction, some people don't. It varies. And Americans, again, it depends who you talk to. I mean, people, I think it probably makes a huge difference from their location. Like, New Yorkers are more liberal, obviously, and people down south are more conservative. But um, I think the distinction would be that Americans are more in your face, like they're more real, and they're willing to disagree and not make it a personal issue, comparatively to Canadians who have this weirdness about their patriotism in comparison to America. Pardon me.
So that's interesting. Now, did you grow up in Canada, or when did you kind of move there?
uh, I moved to Canada when I was 7,
Oh.
so I have both. I have this, like, the Russian culture is very confrontational, and we don't take things personally. And if we do, we tell each other and get it out, and it's fine. But Canada's very British still in that sense. They hold everything in, and they'll be very kind of passive aggressive about things, and very reserved. And
That's interesting. You said it's so different from Russia. Do you have Russian relatives that you've talked to about Bitcoin, or any friends over there? I mean, it's probably been so long since you've been over there.
well, I've been back recently, but no, they live in villages. Like, they have other concerns,
Yeah.
right? And um, I mean, they're the ones that Bitcoin would really empower and liberate. But no, I haven't talked to them about it, to be honest, because uh, maybe I should next time. I just when I don't. I have other things to talk to them about when I see them because I don't see them very often. But yeah, no, it's funny. All my friends in Canada are of Polish or Italian descent because those cultures have that kind of they have the similar attitudes as me. So, but pure Canadians, I find them a little bit insincere.
Okay. Um,
Yeah.
so how do you see Bitcoin helping the unbanked and those who need it the most? And what do we need to get to those people? I think there's probably some infrastructure needs there first, before they even get into Bitcoin technology. So what are some ways do you think that they can be helped?
Well, I'm really excited because like the next project I think I'm gonna do is called Our Crypto Future, and it's about I've been very ideological and political and philosophical about the coin concepts, so I want to bring it down a notch and talk about the physical application of this tech, the possible future physical application. So I want to talk about like gamifying community and empowering people in third world countries to do tasks that, let's say, researchers who are researching and classifying animal species or discovering new types of ants or something in Costa Rica, they don't have time for the bureaucratic kind of filing system that you have to submit to, let's say, uh, officially produce the new species of ant. So imagine somebody, a scientist in Canada, displacing that task on a little kid in Costa Rica who can run around the forest and make the documentations and whatever the process is for that. He can maybe for one summer learn those specific, very specialized skills and then be paid directly in Bitcoin for every species he files or every elephant he tags or every bird he spots in a specific region to count populations. How amazing would that be? Because that'll cost, the universities less, but the kids and the young anybody really could do it. They would gain so much from it directly, right? That would empower them so much, and jobs can be created in such unique ways, and they're not these aren't crappy jobs. Like these are interesting jobs, and maybe that kid will grow up to be a scientist in Costa Rica because of this influence. And it's the chain effect. I mean, I these things, people don't think about them, but that's like a really cool possibility, and that could happen very easily. So all and again, going back to Russia, my cousins and family, they're not wealthy there, but they have smartphones. They have a better deal on smartphones that I have in Canada. Canada is the most expensive country for cell phones, like in
Hmm.
the world. Like we have the most ridiculous oligopoly for for our cell phone usage. So it's just so expensive. So like my cousin has a nicer package than me and will get like more data, a better plan and everything. So this tech, it's sold to countries that are less fortunate than us for less. So my iPhone would cost like $700 or $300 with a plan. There it'll be just like $200 without a plan. Like so they really market it different to different regions. So it's not far fetched that people in very desolate parts of Africa will have very simple access to smartphones very soon, and some of them already do. And I think I was talking to a friend, and he said there was a study done recently that showed people would rather have their phones and access to internet than running clean water. Like their priorities are very different. And
Hmm.
it's funny because after I made my Love Bitcoin video, which says, anyone with a smartphone can have an opportunity to participate in world economy, and people, oh well, people in Africa don't even have running water, so what the hell are you talking about? Well, actually they would prefer to have access to information and access to monetary empowerment than running water. That's
Yeah,
that's
that
their
is
priority.
interesting.
Yeah, so it's not far-fetched. And people in Kenya and Zimbabwe, I think they've already been using the currency that you can use through your phones. It's not Bitcoin, but they were like ahead of the game with that. And it's just so exciting. I can't contain
Yeah.
myself, really.
And there's even
Yeah,
companies
people
out
ask.
there.
close-minded about it. Oh, and there's that company now who's doing Bitcoin through texting. Like you don't even need a
Yes.
smartphone anymore. You can send Bitcoin with text. So hello, like it's not far-fetched. Like some kid in Kenya can definitely get a cheap phone that with the ability to text and make money and send remittance. It's not far-fetched at all.
Totally. And it's very empowering. And like you said, if you have that kind of knowledge, if you have access to knowledge, then you can pull yourself out of these sometimes really, bad situations that these people have found themselves in, a lot of times through no fault of their own. Even, I mean, imperialism has wreaked havoc all over the world and, driven people into poverty. And something that I find kind of interesting with Bitcoin is you also have an option of where you're putting and spending your money, so you don't have to use it to support empire. You don't have to use dollars, which at Bitcoin Not Bombs we call them blood dollars or war dollars, because that's what is backing the U.S. currency is war and oil and and then some other funny little economic projects, but it's mostly building empire, and it's. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, you're so right, and it's just people. I hate how close-minded people are about it. I believe I watched a speech with Andreas recently. He was talking about how remittance makes up to 20% of some third world countries, and Western Union takes 15% of each transaction from those people. That's huge for people who are making like what, $2 an hour or something, right? Like that's huge. And imagine if they all switched to Bitcoin and it costs them 5 cents per transaction per remittance sent, sending remittance. That's huge. That's saving lives. That's innate. That's directly empowering. That is not even an overblown statement. That is saving lives. So for people to criticize this technology and say it's only for white people and privileged, totally wrong. This is for the unbanked. This is for the people who don't have choice and opportunity.
Absolutely. And I wrote an article about it called Bitcoin is Post Privilege and Pro Human Rights, when some of these other articles about white privilege were coming out, basically using the same examples that
Ditto.
Andreas uses a lot. And yeah, I mean, it's directly empowering to people, and if they can gain access to the technology, I mean, there's so much they can do. And I don't for a minute think that Western Union and PayPal and some of these other payment system companies aren't on the very same side as the bankers and the regulators when pushing regulations like the ones in New York. They stand the most to lose from this technology because they're not going to be able to charge 14% to send money to the poorest parts of the world anymore. Not since Bitcoin is on the scene now.
They're gonna have to compete or bye bye. And
Exactly.
thank good riddance. Good riddance, because they're exploitative. I mean, they're the only option, so they're gonna exploit it. I mean, that's how the market works. If you're the only option, but now they're gonna have to compete. And I mean, I understand the charge. I understand why they have to charge because they have to anti-fraud and they have to guarantees, and because it's a pull system, not a push system, right? But with Bitcoin it's a push system. You send it, that's it,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you don't have to verify anything, you don't have to take money out of anywhere, it's just sending it. So bye bye to fraud and bye bye to identity theft and exploitative 15% remittance charges.
Yeah, there's no one that can stop you from sending money to anyone else if you have their address. And that's really important. And antiwar.com ran into this issue. One of the reasons they started taking Bitcoin is they found out they were being spied on by the FBI, which is, terrifying in and of itself, but they were also trying to target the donors too. And even if you just find out that an organization you're donating money to is being spied on, you're going to be less
Yeah.
likely to continue donating money. Or if you have someone like PayPal and PayPal's done this before with WikiLeaks, where they've stopped transactions from going through, and so it's revolutionary that in that respect because there's no one saying you can't send money to those people over there.
Right. I think another thing, going back to anonymity, the transparency of Bitcoin right now, that's a great thing too, actually, because imagine I think within 5 years, most politicians, this is my ideal, politicians would be taking, they'll have an address for their campaign, donations, and we'll be able to track every transaction they make on the blockchain. It'll be totally transparent, and politicians not using Bitcoin are going to by default be suspected of misusing the funds that they're being donated. Of course, they could still, I'm sure they could have private donors that donate the money and they'll use it in means we might not approve of, but the donations from, those people to that address, we'll know what's happening with that at least. So it'll be a positive step. And I mean, I'd like banks to adopt Bitcoin, because then we'll see what the hell they're doing with the money, right? It'll be all on the blockchain. It'll be all publicly visible. So I mean, the transparency could be a good thing, and maybe Bitcoin should stay transparent for those reasons, and then we could have things like zero cash kind of working on its own blockchain, or working on the Bitcoin protocol. I don't think they've decided which one they're going to do yet, but it may be both. So there'll be options. The point is having the option, right? It's not whether Bitcoin's going to do it or not. It's whether we're going to be able to in some way.
hmm And people have brought this point up before with charities too. You want to know where your money is going if you're donating to a charity. So it is kind of interesting that seeing these politicians jumping on board. I know a few Libertarian Party guys have jumped on. What do you think about that? Do you think that Bitcoiners are going to be donating to political campaigns?
Sure, if they believe in politics in that sense. Libertarians still believe in smaller organized politics, community based, small governments. So yeah, I think it'll be really empowering to people who do believe in that kind of system and the Republican system. So yeah, I mean, all the power to them. I mean, I'm not going to donate to politicians, but if you're going to do it with Bitcoin, to address that you can track their transactions with, it makes sense to me.
Yeah, yeah, especially for people. And I'm wondering if there is outreach. This seems like something maybe the foundation, people in the foundation might be doing outreach to people who are working on campaign finance reform, because there's so much money, there's so much dark money that goes into politics. You really don't know. And what it comes down to is really not, your average people donating money. It's these corporations and, people like, and the bankers too, like Goldman Sachs. I mean, even in the last election in the U.S., the last general election with Barack Obama and Mitt Romney, you had the same banks funding both sides of the campaign in massive amounts too. I mean, really.
Well, that's what I just hope the blockchain tech isn't inherently monetary. There's so many other applications to it. Bitcoin is just a decentralized app on the blockchain. So it just happened to be, the most widely adopted, quickly incorporated use of it,
Mhm.
as currency. So, but the blockchain is beyond that. We could do so much on it. It's just a completely revolutionary technology, and in its essence, it's a free speech tech, right? Because it's public ledger, which is language, which protocol, which is language, which is speech, which is hopefully free speech, and that's what we're fighting against. But so I'm hoping that what you're talking about, JP Morgan and the banks and the elections and Obama, I just hope like they'll do their thing and we'll pretend to watch the show, but then we'll have our own show and the networks that they can't get to. That's my hope.
Yeah.
They can, I'll leave it to them. Whatever, they can have their little circle jerk. I don't want to be any part of it, and there's going to be ways that I can literally not participate.
Right. I haven't voted since I guess like 2008, and it's like I don't ever plan on voting. What we did last year was we did a, or not last year, last election was a vote for nobody campaign. So like there would be
Yeah.
people who like wave their signs on the road for whatever candidate. So like me or my boss Tim would like go up with our vote for nobody signs and stand a little bit down from them. Like if we had free time, and wave, and we were getting more honks with the vote for nobody sign than the Obama people and the Romney people. So,
Come on. And
and
I mean, and it's not just you guys, it's not just libertarians and ANCAPs. It's like there's the lowest turnout in voting history right now in America. from
Yeah.
state to state. It varies state to state, but all the time I see headlines like lowest turnout at Kentucky for local voting. Like, it's great.
Yeah, it was something like 66% of people didn't vote in the last election. So technically, we were making the joke, technically nobody won because people didn't vote. Can we elect no one, But people aren't quite there, so I get the people who are still trying to do the political thing. But you mentioned earlier about the different applications of the blockchain. What are some other applications that you find really interesting?
Well, contracts will be great because you'll be able to get divorced on the blockchain without a really expensive third party to go through.
Hmm.
You'll be able to declare. I read actually an article about this, and imagine some journalist is in a war-torn country and he takes a photograph at a certain moment in time, and it's specific to that moment in time, and he needs to prove that he took it at that moment in time. How do you do that? You upload it on the blockchain and it's becomes part of the public ledger, and it's verifiable through the math, right? So, and then he can like disappear. He can do it anonymously, hopefully too, and disappear. And that protects him. He doesn't have to like take the picture and then like try to fly to New York to his publisher, and he'll like literally just upload it and like be able to get away. Or I mean, that's just a very specific example, but that's revolutionary. Is it's a proof. It's speech. It's and it happens in real time.
Yeah, and that's something
It's
that I recently found out about too. And it's so interesting because what it does is I think it resolves the IP debate in a very reasonable way too, because you have a lot of pro IP people or anti IP people. I kind of fall more on the I don't really believe in intellectual property side, but it does provide you proof of publishing in a non-legacy backed way as far as like going through a copyright organization, or you're trying to get something copyrighted or patented, which you see all kinds of patent abuse. I think that's one of the main reasons many people are anti-IP, is just because they've seen the abuses of the patent system, whether it's Apple or anyone else.
stagnates progress, I think, and innovation. A lot of patents do, and that's a brilliant point. I mean, I like I said, there's we can't even comprehend. We cannot even comprehend. So with our crypto future, hopefully I'll get around to it as soon as possible. I'll probably be working with coin culture from Gulf. They're cool guys on the project. But yeah, I'll try to explore some applications of the tech. Like even I mentioned gamifying communities. So let's say the only way anarchism or small community libertarianism could really work is, especially in this day and age with the higher population, is with the blockchain tech. And imagine having like a garden and everyone has to contribute to the garden, and or to just the community. There's loads of tasks that need to be done. Obviously there has to be ways to maintain things, like a Twitter feed of tasks, and people volunteer for the tasks and they get paid in like specific colored coins, or just in their own cryptocurrency of that specific area, or in just Bitcoin. I mean, so many options, right? And then once they complete the task, they get it. It'll just be released automatically through the blockchain. Or they could even get just reputation systems, and the people with the highest reputation could win goals and rewards, and it'll be like a video game, literally gamifying community, but you get directly empowered with money. You get, and little kids could be doing it. Maybe this restaurant could give colored coins for the garden center, and they could exchange, do some sort of cross promotion. God, like it's endless. Like the possibilities are endless.
And that's a good point. The best way to get new people onto something is make it fun to use too.
Yeah.
Incentivize them to use it. So, well, we can. I think we're getting kind of close. Well, we can kind of start wrapping it up. So, I'm gonna do one more question. What do you think are the biggest challenges facing Bitcoin in the future? And where do you how do you see Bitcoin handling some of those?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of different forces in the community that are kind of battling and which way the tech should go, like if how it should, whether it should fork and how it should fork, and things like, I mean, there's little problems like charging people for double spending and whether it is possible to double spend, and that's a whole debate. And
Yeah, like the
there's
51% attack and
yeah, with the 51% attack, I'm not too worried about that because last time that it happened for like a couple minutes, and everyone, the community's so strong, it banded together and overrode the 51% attack. So I feel the community, like, that's anarchy in its most prime example. Like, they just band together and do it. Nobody's getting paid to do it. Nobody, there's no like call to action. There's no central power. Like, hey guys, it just happens, and people are aware, and people are participating to the point of uh, really caring about the tech and trying to preserve it. And I mean, there's a lot of issues. There's like the blacklisting, and I mean, I'm pretty sure Circle's doing that, considering that they didn't say they're not. But the most thing that I'm scared of is what we talked about earlier. We covered it, the appropriation of it, and it becoming just another banking system that's faster and cheaper. But I just don't think it should be anything resembling the banking system of today. But we'll
and
see.
if it ever
Uh,
does, we should kill it. So, um,
well, if it's not Bitcoin, it'll be something else because
right.
the blockchain's the chain. So we'll see. There's a lot of concern, and there's no point worrying about it. All you can do is work, 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 and hope that other people are working in a direction that will ultimately create the most benefit for the most people. Now, that's a bit utilitarian, but I think that's the potential of this technology. It literally can benefit the most of the people, like the unbanked people. And yeah, I think it will. I'm really hopeful for it.
Awesome. And speaking of work, where can people keep up with your work? Because you're doing a lot of it.
Thank you. Bravetheworld.com and or Brave the World channel on YouTube, and I'm on Twitter quite a bit at Brave the World. You can harass me on there. Yeah, check it
All
out
right.
and be entertained, hopefully.
Yes. Well, awesome. We'll definitely check out Julia's work at bravetheworld.com and on Twitter and YouTube also. You got to check out the videos, seriously. Until next time, I'll be doing these kind of weekend shows sporadically. They're kind of like the crypto combos extracurricular after hours or maybe before hours show. Depending on when I do it on the weekends. But thanks so much for watching, and until then, keep calm and encrypt on.